Let's build a sword rack.
When we were kids, we used to love visiting our grandparents' house. They're such lovely people, and we used to have the family gatherings there. As kids, it was great because the house was always full of all this cool old stuff. Had a nice garden as well. But my grandfather was a bit of an antiques collector, and for a large part of his life, he went around auctions all across Belgium, buying things like bayonets, swords, lamps, weighing scales, statues, books, medals, all that kind of stuff. As kids, it was great because super interesting. You get to play with swords and wear helmets, and he always used to tell stories about them as well. We used to learn a lot about history, and it was such a big part of our childhood that when once they passed away, we wanted to keep some of those things as a way to remember them by. But as I moved around, they just ended up in boxes or in a cupboard somewhere, out of sight. I wanted to put them somewhere where I could see them every day, like walk past there and remember my grandparents, think about their stories. So I thought back how my grandfather did it. And in their house, literally every room had a wall-mounted rack covered in swords and rifles and stuff. Obviously, I didn't want to go that far just yet. So I did a ton of research on historical weapon racks and wanted to design my own one. So I sketched out a bunch of different designs and I figured it could be interesting to record the process from sketch to final result. So here we go. So to start, I'm going to design the main support shape and structure in Illustrator. This I can then duplicate as many times as I want and trace directly onto the wood. And to make the template a bit stronger, I have to glue it onto cardboard. Now I can easily trace the shape onto the wood. I did end up repeating this process with a larger piece of wood, so I had 7 spots instead of just 5. Then I used a jigsaw to cut out the shape. I actually dropped one of the pieces of wood and snapped a big chunk of it off. So I had to drill in some holes, create some plugs, and glue the whole thing together to make it nice and strong. And after that came hours and hours of sanding. I'm also reclaiming this piece of wood from an old cupboard, so I had to cut it down to size and then sand the whole thing down. This was probably the most difficult part of sanding because this piece of wood had very deeply ingrained stains. So it really took a long time to kind of get rid of some of the shapes in the wood and get it looking kind of flat, like a flat solid color. Then I also cut out these extra rounded pieces just to make the design look a bit more intricate and beautiful. And a bit more sanding. And also some manual sanding to get the rounded support insides nice and smooth. Next time preparing to cut the frame that goes all the way around the backboard, just to give it a bit more detail, make it look a bit more antique. Next up, the first layer of staining. Just need to bring the color in line with the backboard so it all matches. First, gluing it in place. A nail gun. And now for some positioning and drilling all the way through the backboard. And here's where things start to take shape. So I'm just drilling through the existing holes and lining it up with the other piece of the wood. Then I can push the screws through just far enough so it snags on the wood, so I can position it correctly. Then I'll glue it into position. Attach the top supports. Glue those as well for extra support. And then once that's done, I can screw from the bottom and push the screws through all the way. So it's it all piece of wood, nice and tight. Now for the other side. Just a little bit more sanding to clean up the glue and some of the rust spots. Now that the whole thing's been assembled, and all the different types of wood more or less have the same color stain, I can now do a final staining just to bring the lot to the color I want. The main difficulty here is trying to let it all absorb at the same rate, because it's all different types of wood, and they'll absorb the stain differently. So I just want to make sure there's no big patches of dark colors and that the stain is spread out properly. And then once I'm happy with the stain color, I'll also do a layer of varnish on top. It'll make the color look a bit richer, give like a bit of an antique feel to it, and a bit of glossy tint. Bring the whole thing together. All done. Time to mount. The fork trick actually only managed to work thanks to the magic of video editing. I'm still very new to this kind of woodworking, but I'm very happy with the results. What do you guys think?